In this video, I will be showing you how to use your Realeather leather sculpting sunflower kit to take these pieces of natural vegetable tanned leather and make them into a beautiful, realistic, and durable leather sunflower like this one. So now all my 3 leather pieces of my sunflower are cased. They're still damp all the way through, but they are not wet anymore. They're not that really floppy texture like when I first wetted them down. They've firmed up. They're ready for sculpting. I'm going to start with the center of the sunflower. I'm going to put these pieces to the side. The center of the sunflower, you'll notice, is quite a bit thicker than the petals, and that's because we want the center to have a little bit of dimension to it and kind of pop out a little bit. So the first thing that you want to do is take your stylus tool and use sort of the edge of the stylus and run it around the outer edge, and this is the smooth side facing up. Run it around this outer edge at an angle. So I'm just kind of smoothing out that corner, that cut edge, just a little bit. Just press hard enough that it's kind of pressing it down and rounding it off a bit, but not so hard that it's catching on the leather. Alright, so once that is done, I'm going to turn this piece over. So here's the back side. And with my thumb, I'm just going to go around and just try to curl the edges up just the littlest bit. I mean, I'm not trying to actually sort of roll it. And you do have to press with a little bit of pressure to get it to do this, but you just want them to curl up just a tiny bit at the edge. And this is the other part of kind of disguising that cut edge a little bit and making this look more natural. Alright, once I've got it, it'll kind of look like this. It looks like it's just kind of cupping up at the edge a little bit. And put it back down. It's a little bit wonky right now, but now that I've got it back on the flat surface, just going to kind of press down the edges and just make sure everything's sitting flat and is still pretty evenly round. It hasn't kind of gone off shape. So now that it's starting to get some of a kind of rounded shape to it, with my finger I'm just going to press in on the center just a little bit. The center of a sunflower usually does kind of go in a little bit, and it gives it some more visual interest. So let me just, sometimes that'll flatten out your edges a bit, and if that happens you can always just go back and roll them again. So now that I've got that kind of texture happening and shape, I'm going to take the pointed end of the stylus and start basically just poking into the leather. You don't want to be poking so hard that you're completely flattening it out, but don't worry if it flattens a little bit. We can kind of re-roll that edge. It's always easier once it's been done once. It'll kind of take the shape again. And you can see I'm just sort of making lots of little dots close enough together that they create kind of an overall texture that fills the whole space, but not so close together that they all just disappear. You want to do this to fill up the entire thing with this texture, and make sure you go all the way to the edge, even sort of over the edge a little bit if you can, at a bit of an angle, so that this texture covers the entire piece. Once you've covered this center piece with that dotted texture, you'll probably notice that it flattened it out a bit, and that's completely fine. Just sort of turn it over and gently kind of redo the first step that you did to roll up that edge. You may wonder why you're doing it twice, but because it stretches the leather a little bit to kind of change the shape of it, it is much easier to get that shape back without completely messing up this texture. If you've already done it once, it'll sort of fall into shape pretty naturally. And then again, I'm going to press down my finger. I'm actually going to roll this a little bit more. How much dimension you want on your center just kind of depends on the look you're going for. You can either do more or less of these steps. And now the last thing I'm going to do with this center is just, again, with the stylus, I'm just going to do some darker dots, kind of filling in just that center part that I pressed down. It'll help press it down a little bit more, and it'll also help kind of distinguish the texture from what's around it and give it a little bit more shape. So now that is what that center looks like, and you just want to make sure that it can sit flat. The edges in the center can sit flat on your surface, and then it is ready to go off to the side to dry. The two petal pieces are now ready to go, and you can start with either of them. They're done basically the same way. This one, I am going to start with the smooth side of the leather facing up, because that is the side I want to make my texture marks on with the pointed end of the stylus. And these marks you'll be able to see in the pattern in your kit. It's basically 2 lines per petal that separate the petal into thirds-ish. It's not very precise. It essentially looks like that. If you prefer not to do this many lines, or you just don't care that it have that much texture, you could just do 1 line down the center if you want. But don't worry that they be absolutely identical, as long as they're not wildly off, like, going way off to the side, it'll be just fine. They just need to be sort of approximately separating the petals into about thirds, and they do need to have a bit of a curve, just so they can kind of follow the outer curve of the petal. And they'll either come together at the end of the petal or come very close to a point. Make sure that you press down hard enough with the stylus that you can get a nice clear line. If the leather seems to be at all shiny, you're getting any moisture coming up when you do these lines, it's definitely too wet. And that is also probably true if you find that you make the lines easily but they don't seem to stay very sharp. Your leather may be too wet and need to sit. It's completely fine to do a line and then go back over it if you want to make it a little bit darker. You can go over it as many times as you want if you want to more lightly scribe the line and then go back and do it more clearly, then that will work just fine. Once you've got all those petal lines on there, I'm going to do is go around. All of the petals are done the same. I'm going to go around to all of them and just gently pinch them, like closing a book with the side with the lines on it will be kind of in the inside of this pinch. So I've still got the front side of the leather facing me. I'm just going to go around real quick and just with my fingers just kind of pinch them basically in the middle. And if your leather is the right moisture level, it should do what mine is doing here, where it's not particularly hard to move around. It's pretty soft and malleable, but it also is staying very nicely in the place that I have put it. So you've gone all the way around, and then I want to go around one more time, and my fingers, my pointer fingers, I'm kind of holding to just hold this pinch in a little bit, hold that shape, and with my thumbs I'm just going to gently curl back the edges of the petal just a little bit. Once you've done it, you've gotten it started, it can sometimes be easier to just lay it down and sort of squeeze it a little bit. You'll find that there's only so much you can curl it back because they're pretty narrow, but even doing it just a bit will really give a lot of dimension to your petals. And as you're doing this, don't worry if the petals are kind of look a little bit squished or a little narrower than you think they should be. We're sort of overdoing the forming just a little bit as we go through, because it is a lot easier to kind of curl these more than necessary now, and then flatten them out later if need be, then try to get more shape into it later. Once you have pinched each one of these petals and curved the edges to give them shape, the next step is to get either a small jar ring like this one, or it could be a small cup or a tube, a cardboard tube, anything. It just has to be about 2¼ inches across. And this is going to help me to just shape the overall flower and keep it symmetrical. So I'm laying my sunflower piece down on here. I'm going to press down with my finger just a little bit. I'm not pressing it all the way down to the table. But I do want it to go down just a bit so that the petals start to kind of stick up. And then while holding it there, I'm just going to take the thumb of my other hand and gently curve down each one of these petals. You'll find that when you do this, it really kind of opens up the overall shape of the petal. Some of the curling that we did in the last step will sort of flatten out a little bit. And so that's one of the reasons why you need to make sure you do as much of it as you can, because that way it ends up still having texture after this. Don't like press too hard and bend the edge of the petal like over the corner of the ring. That will leave a line. It'll look really unnatural. And just kind of curve it up like this. And doing it over a jar ring or something else helps it to just all stay symmetrical and not get off kilter. You can take it off of the ring and just make sure, if there's any other petals that seem like they didn't quite get curved enough, or if there's just anything you want to adjust, that's the time to do it. Now, this other piece I already have ready, and it has gone through the same set of steps as this one, because for the most part these two petal pieces are done exactly the same. The only real difference is we want one of them to be a bit flatter and one to be to have the petals sort of stick up a little bit more, just so there's more dimension to the whole flower and it's not just two pieces completely flat together. So this one's already on my work surface, so I'm just going to actually press this down just a tiny bit. I don't want to completely press out the curve I got on the petals. I want to leave a little bit, just like this, but you do want it to lay relatively flat to the surface. And then I am going to take this other piece, which I am going to have be my sort of topmost petal piece, and grabbing my center, which I already have textured and kind of formed, I'm going to sit it there in its appropriate spot right in the middle. I'm going to hold it down here just on the center, because that way I'm not going to press down the edges. This part was already pressed down. And while holding it in place, with my other hand I'm just going to gently kind of push up the petals just around the edge of this center. And just gently push against it. And then if they're sticking up too much, while kind of pushing up against it a bit, you can sort of curve them back down a little. And then if I lay it down on my other layer, I can see that I've got a good amount of dimension. These petals are sticking up a little bit more. There's a good amount of space there. So this is how the final pieces will sit. You'll want to layer up your petal pieces so that the petals from the piece on top kind of extend out between the petals of the piece on the bottom. For the purpose of drying, it's best to leave your bottommost petal piece just on the hard, whatever your work surface to dry, and it's better to leave this upper piece, you can leave the center in there, and just leave it on your ring or jar ring or whatever you're using, because that way as it dries, gravity is not going to be flattening it out. It will still look the way it is meant to look.